Okay, you sausage, chowder, melon hoarders. I don't know. Look, I started this video literally like um, a minute ago, and it went on for like 20 seconds, and then the doorbell rang. I'm in isolation for a while. I'm not expecting the doorbell to ring like ever, but it happened as soon as I started recording this, which means usually when the universe is being obstinate like this, it means that someone who's going to watch this video is going to go on to make some pretty big changes to the universe. So I'm the catalyst for that. You're welcome, and to whomever that is, just don't try and kill me because, gosh, it's just the wrong move. Like I can't stress it to you enough. Anyway, okay. So I've had a couple friends even before the isolation reach out and take me up on my offer to teach them how to be a software tester. And I've had a friend or two since isolation say, "Hey, I've got tons of time right now. Do you want to do this?" So I decided to make up some videos. I'm trying to make them a little bit more generic as opposed to targeted at one person individually. And as you have questions, send them to me and I'll cover them video to video. And if you hear an answer to a question you didn't ask, it'll just be extra information for you, or perhaps it'll spark up some thinking that you have to lead to other questions. So, yeah, if you do have questions at any point, either leave them in the comments or send me a text or a message via any social media platform that we correspond on. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, what is a software tester? Um, we're basically just going to cover that kind of topic for the day. I'm going to give you some contextual information around what a software tester is, um, and then over time go down into those layers with a little bit more depth. Um, yeah, so just starting right off here, what is a software tester? It is not what you might think. Oh. Software tester is someone who tests software. Boom, nailed it. I can go home now, right? Like, I've done my job. I've told you what it is. No, the title is exactly as it sounds. You test software. Now, a software tester isn't always the title. You might hear the term QA or test engineer or QA engineer or combinations and mixtures of words. There are some differences, some subtle differences from one kind of job description to the next, but we'll get into that a little bit later. For now, we're just going to call it software testing or being a software tester. Simple enough, right? This is the table of contents for this slideshow. My amazing presence is going to cut off a small portion of one of the slides. Not a super big deal. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth talking about it than you're going to get from reading it. I'll also make these slides publicly available in my Drive share. Hopefully I remember to put it in the description of the video below. And I know this is usually the point where people are like, man, go ahead and smash that like button and like massage the subscribe button. I'm not that kind of guy. Okay, if you wanna tickle the like button or full on nut shot the subscribe button, your call. I don't really care. I don't have any kind of monetization set up on these, so it is what it is. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go through is terminology. So I'm going to use these terms a lot, and if you don't understand what they mean, you're going to be really confused, right? It's like talking to anyone in the military and they start using all these acronyms and abbreviations and they say a sentence and you're like, yes, I just had a seizure or a stroke. I don't no idea what you just said. Should have been Spanish for all I care. So all these are words that you've heard before, but in the context of software testing have a different meaning. So first one here, production. Production is what we call our live system. Okay, so the difference of production and in test or in development are pretty clear, and the lines are usually fairly concrete. Like it's uh, basically as something is being made, it's in development. As the developer believes that it is ready for being deployed, they give it to a tester, and then it's in test. And then after we've tested it and given it feedback, and everything looks like it's okay, we push it out to production, often called deploying. Maybe I'll add that as well. Nope, can't. I'm not in edit mode. I'm in present mode. Anyway, oh, where did that go? Okay, so yeah, production just means any live system. So if I say we're trying to push this into production, it means that we're trying to take it from a state that is uh, potentially not ready and put it into a place where it is ready or um, is viewable from a normal targetable audience. An example of this, a real world example of this, is say you have a car manufacturing facility. While the vehicle is being pieced together, it's not ready for public use. So it's in development at that point. Um, and then you take the test on or the car onto a testing phase to make sure that doors open, windows go down, car starts, um, and that it can be driven. And that's the in test portion. And when it shows up to the lot to be purchased, it's in production. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze, and it's making me yawn. Weird things. I'll probably do this a lot, and I don't like to go through and do a lot of editing, so um, I'm probably going to sneeze a few times today. Anyway, so that's kind of what in development, in test, and production mean. It's just the level of usage and access that various people have. Um, when I say development, if I don't say it as in like in development, then the term development by itself um, is usually referring to the group, the department of the company that is in charge of creating or manufacturing features or products or fixes or whatever it is. Um, I am currently in development. I would not consider myself as a developer, uh, even though I'm in development. Um, yeah. It's I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but development is what I'm referring to as the department. Um, a product owner, product manager, they're usually in a different department, more of a business oriented department. A product owner or product manager, sometimes they're um, the same thing. In other companies, they're different. It just really depends on where you're at and the structure and resources available to the company. So, a product owner is someone who basically has the say over what a product is or does. So, there's someone in the world who thought that the smart car was a good product, right? There's someone who thought an El Camino was a good product. Um, and they're basically the ones that go out and do all this field research and give the justification for having the product to begin with, as well as doing market research to figuring out where that product is going to try and fall in the overall picture of things. So if you were to design a car and you're going to put it out into market, simply drawing something up and saying, "Doesn't this look cool?" That's not going to cut it. You're going to have to try and figure out specs of the vehicle, customer expectations, what they rely on, what they use to determine uh, buying necessity and things of that nature to determine whether or not the vehicle is even worth investing time into developing and putting it into production. Um, And so a product owner is typically in charge of all that. A product manager is basically, after all that work has been done by the product owner, the manager goes through and tries to make it happen. Um, it's a very kind of gray, fuzzy line between the two. Most companies don't really have them separated, but for some bigger products where it's not just a car, but it's a line of cars, you'll have a product owner, let's say, of like F-150s. Okay. You could have a F-150 product owner, but there are like 5 or 6 different kinds of F-150s. So each one of those might have a product manager over them to bring them into the view and perspective and goal that the product owner has in mind. Okay. Project, product, and feature. So a project is usually, like the difference between these is size, scope. Okay. A project is usually large. For example, Ford F-150. If you just say the Ford F-150, there's so many things that could mean. It's kind of a project. The F-150 is a project. A product of the project is, say, the Lariat, F-150 Lariat. That's its own individual product. And within the Lariat, let's say it has a moonroof to it, that is a feature of the product inside the project. So it from project to product to feature, it just gets a little bit more condensed and specific on what you're talking about. And so it's important to know that, because if I'm talking about things from a project standpoint, we're looking at things from a very wide perspective. It's the place where generalities usually hold weight. Like saying, 40% of American households own a truck. I'm making that number up, but that's the kind of statistic that you would want to have on your project. For your product, knowing that isn't too huge, because you're one product of 5 or 6 at your company, and probably one product of hundreds in the world. And so that kind of number is like, that's cool, but it doesn't specifically contextualize and justify your product. So if you were to say like 40% of households have a truck, and 10% of those have a moonroof or a sunroof, now that's the kind of statistic that you want as a product owner or a product manager. And then even further down from that is for feature, is the moonroof or sunroof, is it retractable? And how many of the ones that are available and in use are retractable? And so it gets a little bit more granular, the information that you're trying to gather to determine whether or not something is worth doing. Okay, I beat that horse enough. Feature or a bug. Okay, feature or a bug. This is usually a topic of great discussion and debate, because it really depends on the timing of things. So we've talked about a feature, right? Feature being like a moonroof or a sunroof. And let's say one of the functionalities of this is that it is retractable. You can open it, close it, lock it, whatever you want to do. Those are features. A bug is when a feature is not working the way it was designed. Now, it's important that you remember that it's based off of the design, not the desire. So an example of this, let's say that there's once upon a time it was designed to not be retractable. Okay, it was just solid. We've all seen those. They're just windows in the top of the car. And that by itself is a feature. But one day someone says, "Hey, I think this should open. I think it should be retractable." Some people might go in and say, "Oh, well, it's a bug that it doesn't, because you want it to be retractable, and it's not. Therefore, it's a bug." And that's not entirely true. It was designed to not open, so it doesn't open. which would make the request more of a feature than a bug. This seems pretty obvious and straightforward, but it can get a little bit convoluted when we're talking about software and systems. Um, for example, uh, I recently had an issue with a bank I opened up an account with, where when you're registering, it doesn't ask you to put in like an email address. It just says, give us a username, give us a password. Okay, you're good to go. Here's your account. When I tried logging back in, it wouldn't let me log in because it was trying to send a confirmation code to an email address for two-factor authentication that I didn't sign up for, but they insisted that I use. And because I hadn't set up an email, it wouldn't let me log in. Um, that's still not a bug because that's exactly what the product manager intended the experience to be like. It's a crappy experience. It's a bad experience to have someone register and use and not ask for details that they're going to need the next time they log in. That's a terrible experience, but it's the way it was designed. So me wanting them to require an email address at the time of registration so that it doesn't happen in the future, that's a feature request. It might seem like a bug because I can't gain access to the system that I literally just registered for, but it was designed that way. It was designed to be a bad experience. And so it's that's where people are like, oh well, then it's a bug. If it's a bad experience, it's a bug, and that's not true. If it's designed in that fashion, it doesn't matter how bad of an experience it is. It's a feature, not a bug. It's a bad feature, but a feature nonetheless. Um, anyway, so yeah, the difference between a feature and a bug is really based off design. Even if the design is 10 years old and is in no way indicative of what the current product manager wants, the fact that nothing has been done to change it means it's still a feature. It's still not a bug. Now, if they had said to the development group, "Hey, we need to require email addresses during registration," and they made it and said, "Okay, this is done," and it gets pushed out into production, and then I go back on and set up a new account and I have to register again, and then I have the same exact experience the first time, then that's a bug. Um, because the design was to not have it work that way. But just because I had a bad experience doesn't indicate a bug in the slightest. It could just mean they have a bad or a disconnected product manager or product owner. Um, okay, acceptance criteria. Typically, like with that scenario I just talked about, you will have a product owner or a product manager that will say, "Hey, I want this feature, I want this change to happen." Typically, what they do is they'll give to you something called acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is like, because we're introducing this new feature, we expect this to happen, or these are the requirements for after this is implemented. So let's say that the acceptance criteria for requiring an email address during registration is that the customer doesn't have to contact support the next time they try to log in because the system isn't recognizing their email address. That's acceptance criteria. It's pretty obvious. And there are some developers that would argue that if it's not present, then if a customer has a bad experience, then it's still a feature. And that's where things start getting gray and hazy. Um, but the hallmark of good acceptance criteria is that it covers a lot of the basics and basis for which work is being done. Um, so I know I keep talking about this one experience that I had, but let's switch back over to cars because uh, cars are a little bit more. People have a lot more experience with cars than they do with software in particular. We're just looking at it from this perspective, right? So let's say a product owner wants to make the sunroof retractable. They would include some acceptance criteria like it opens. Believe it or not, if that's not an acceptance criteria of a retractable sunroof, some developers might say, well, it's working the way that you said it should because it hits all of these other acceptance criteria, like it's tinted or you can see through it and it doesn't radiate heat, so it keeps the car cool, or it's made out of this kind of glass, or it's this thick, all these other details for the acceptance criteria of that. And if you don't specify that it opens, it doesn't matter that the name of the feature is retractable sunroof. In a developer's mind, it would still function exactly the way that it's expected to. This isn't for all developers. There are some who aren't as anal about it. But acceptance criteria is basically the product owner or manager's way of saying, look, I don't understand how you're going to make this work, but once it's done, it needs to hit these marks. And if it hits those marks, then we can deploy it. Okay. Now a test case is something that QA does or software testing does to affirm functionality or limitation. So a lot of our test cases do derive from acceptance criteria. So if there's an acceptance criteria that says it opens, there will be a software testing test case that says that gives you basically the step-by-step of how to confirm that it opens. Let's say the acceptance criteria is that it opens, but QA finds out in a test case that in order to open it, you can't push a button. Instead, you have to take a screwdriver and unscrew the window and then detach it from the vehicle. It might pass the acceptance criteria because it opens, and it might even pass the test case depending on who wrote it and how they wrote it. But it may not be acceptable for what the product owner or manager wants for the vehicle and what they're projecting their sales off of for having that feature. There are a lot of it would seem stupid or petty kinds of things that you have to navigate and wade through. But the more you do it, the more you realize that when acceptance criteria is kept vague, some product owners or managers use it as a means of avoiding responsibility because they're afraid of failure. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, developers are just being petty. It's hard to say, well, QA is just being lazy, or product ownership is just being shouldered onto the next person. It's not any of those things by themselves. It's kind of a culmination of all of them. Anyway, so a test case is basically something that QA has observed in the past with coordination or with pertinence to the product that they use to determine whether or not the product is functioning. That's it. I'm not even going to say functioning the way it should be. I'm not even going to go that far because that's it's not quite right, and we're going to cover that in the next slide. Okay, that's what a test case is. It's basically a set of instructions to complete a task to confirm a limitation or a behavior. Framework. The term framework is, gosh, it's another one of those fuzzy things, okay? So I could be talking about a framework as though it is the way that a system is architected. And really, we can use architecture as the example, right? So if you think of, high rises as they're being built, they're basically skeletons as they're being built. Some would argue that that's the framework. Others would say, no, that's the foundation, and then the framework goes on top of that. And so it would be like wires and pipes and things of that nature. Basically, a framework is a way of putting an aspect or an idea of technology into a box. So if I talk about, you don't have to remember any of the following terms, just framework. If I say like the Selenium framework is a way to run end-to-end testing. All I'm trying to say is that there's some sort of system or technology out there that, in the box in which it exists, provides some sort of a value. So when we talk about frameworks, we're basically saying we have all these boxes to choose from for technology, and we want to take that box and put it on top of that box, and that box on top of that box, and that box on top of that box, and then overall, with these 8 different frameworks, we can make our own specialized system. Some people would even call that a framework and say that the culmination of these frameworks is another framework. And it's really just a way of using terminology to put things into neatly organized and easy to discuss boxes. Because everything that we talk about and everything that we discuss, they're all very abstract things. It's very difficult to take something that's all written out in code and discuss it from a literal perspective when it's just so dynamically behaving, especially in correspondence with other technologies. And I'll go into much deeper detail of what that means much later in these videos. But essentially, framework is just a box that takes an abstract concept and puts it into a bit more of a discussable format. Okay. And because I clicked on the other thing, okay, here we go. Okay, so the industry's definition of a software tester is different than my definition of a software tester. I don't like the industry's definition of a software tester. I think it's wrong. I think it's not helpful, and I will wholly refute this definition with my dying breath. So the industry's definition is that a software testing is the process of verifying a computer system or program to decide whether it meets the specified requirements and produces the desired results. As a result, you identify bugs in software product projects. Software testing is indispensable to provide a quality product without any bug or issue. Horse crap. Most of that, horse crap. It puts undue responsibility in the testing court that we have no control over, and it seems to convey a notion that somehow software testing prevents bad code from being deployed. And by bad code, I mean code that has underlying or hidden functionality that is not easy to determine right out, often known as bugs or issues. And that's not our job either. It's not our responsibility. It's not our ownership. The person who owns the code is the person who wrote the code, not the person who tests the code. So everything about this definition tells me that the person who wrote this has never done software testing. And if they have, they should feel ashamed of themselves for this horribly generic and overall unhelpful definition. Here's my definition. And I say this so much, I could almost quote it to you without even having to look at it. But I'm not going to try. As a software tester, you are basically a non-biased third-party assessor of functionality and limitations of a given product or feature. It is not your job, I missed a word there, to determine whether or not something meets certain specifications or requirements, but merely to record and represent what is functioning and how it is functioning. A tester is necessary for the delivery of a project, as it allows for an in-depth and clearer look into the inner workings and less obvious aspects of a given system. So let me put this into perspective for you. We're going to go back to the sunroof idea, okay? And we're going to go back to that retractable sunroof. So let's discuss you have to unscrew the window to get it off, okay? With this definition of a software tester, they're basically saying it's the QA's job to say that's not the way it should be. It should be this way, and to do things like measure the number of turns it takes for each screw to remove it to make sure that it's even across all screws, and that they're testing they're shining light through it to see how much light's coming out the other side to determine whether or not the tinting is perfect for the expected outcome. And I'm looking at all that saying that's insane. That is so stupid. Like, if it's off by a single lumen of light, that there's like not a human eye in the world that would be able to detect that. So confirming that kind of stuff is dumb. And since we didn't make the screws from scratch, and we didn't make the fasteners that they attach to, trying to confirm how many rotations it takes to screw it in properly is putting extra burden on someone who really doesn't have any control over it. And that's the point here, is that because the QA doesn't have the control over the beginning or the end of the process, it makes no sense to make them responsible for the middle of it. So essentially, as a non-biased third-party assessor, I basically say, I want you to approach this as though it's the first time you've ever used this product. Try to approach it like that. I'm just gonna sneeze. I don't. Okay, I'm back. I've been fighting that off for like the last 20 minutes. Anyway, so we're gonna take a look at that same product. Okay. The QA, instead of counting the number of times that each screw is undone to compare them with each other, they're still going to count the number of times that you have to rotate it to get the screw out. But we're also going to measure the screw, and we're going to measure the fastener, and we're going to put all the details of that into a report, including the tintness of the window, and I'm going to sneeze again. Hmm? As soon as I started talking, I knew it was going to happen again. Sorry, I don't know what it is. Pollen, something, I don't know. Anyway, the QA is going to measure all of these things, but they're not going to use that data to make any kind of determination. Instead, with that assessment of how things are working, they're going to hand that off to the product owner or the product manager, the person who knows what the product needs and the kinds of features that the industry has in the space that product exists. Okay, so let's say that the retractable sunroof doesn't retract. Okay, it's not the QA's job to come back and tell the developers, I'm sorry, but the retractable window doesn't retract, because then the developers are going to go into the acceptance criteria and say it doesn't say it needs to here, so what's your point? And then the QA and the developer are going to have an argument about naming conventions and things of that nature. And then the QA is going to get upset and pissed and go to the product manager and say, hey, this product doesn't say what it says it does. Is that what you want? And even if the product manager says, yeah, that's fine, the QA is still going to be mad and upset that they had that debate and that discussion with the developer, because it seems logical that a retractable window should retract. And so there, you get all these emotions involved with this definition that are just unnecessary. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter from a non-biased, non-biased third-party assessor. You're part of the company, but you're not approaching it from the perspective of the company because there's someone else paid to do that. The product owner is worried about the company. The developer is worried about the development. All you're trying to do is give an honest assessment of the functionality of the product. So one example that I give of this whole process is that of, I use the red ball scenario. Okay, so let's say you're a company that makes balls. Okay, and you have your flagship product, which is called Red Ball. And as you can imagine, it's a red ball. And the product's going great. You're selling wonderfully. everyone's happy, but the product owner or the product manager, they do some market research and find out that if they had a product called Green Ball, it might be able to be 20% more expensive to make, but you could split the market in half and almost double down on your profits. So they go, okay, 20% more costs for double the profits. Easy decision. Let's do this. So they go to development and say, hey, we want you guys to make Green Ball. And we think that you can do it using Red Ball. So let's take Red Ball, turn it into Green Ball, and give it to QA and see what happens. And so development does just that. They take Red Ball, paint it green, hand it to QA, and QA takes it and they do something that developers almost always say, why did you do that? Because whenever we find something that turns into a bug or an issue or another feature request, it's because we look at things from a different perspective than the way that they're made. So they're made very much so with the idea of this is what's wanted, here you go. And there's all this metadata around the product, which as QA, we try to assess and figure out. So let's say with Red Ball, over time, we have this test suite, and that's a term I didn't cover. So a test case exists within a test suite, and a test suite is basically a big compendium of all test cases for a given product or project. So you have this, let's say we have this test suite and it has like 80 test cases in it for Red Ball. And the test cases are titled things like throw ball against wall, throw ball against ground, throw ball against grass, throw ball against child, throw ball against crocodile, bite the ball, dip the ball in liquid nitrogen, things like that. Because over time we've learned that for whatever reason, Red Ball tastes like pizza. We don't know why it tastes like pizza. It was never part of the acceptance criteria for it to taste like pizza, but it does. We want to see how much the ball floats in water. We want to know how much the ball weighs. So we take all this metadata of Red Ball and we put them into test cases so that the next iteration of Red Ball we can test against the last version. So we have new Red Ball and previous Red Ball, compare them to each other, and all these meta details get compared and lined up, and we can see the differences from one version to the next. And we give a report of those differences to the product owner and say, is this what you want? And then it's their job to go through line by line and say, okay, this is good, this is bad, I don't care about this, why did you do this? It doesn't matter because I have the details, I have the data now. So let's say they give us Green Ball and we take it and we do all the tests to it. Okay, we don't, usually developers will just say, well, they just wanted a green ball. You can look at it and see that it's green. So why did you do the other 79 tests? It's easy, look at it. Is it green? Pass it on, the job's done. And developers are usually very passionate about their works. They like to see their work deployed. They like to brag about it, or they like to feel good about it. And when QA finds a problem or an issue or things get blockaded in some way, they get kind of impatient with QA or with testing. Because again, they're passionate. They're proud of their work. And they'll insist on you looking at it from just their perspective. It's green. Deploy the damn ball, put it into production. But QA is not going to do that. QA is going to throw the green ball against a wall, throw it against the ground, throw it against a child, going to bite it, going to dip it in liquid nitrogen. We're going to do all these weird things to it. We're going to have it float in water and see what happens. We're going to do all these things to it. And when we're done, we're going to give the report back to the product owner. And something that they'll find out is that because they took a red ball and painted it green, has an extra layer of paint on it that Red Ball doesn't have. That makes it heavier. And because it's now heavier, the shipping cost has gone up. Or perhaps the amount that it bounces back is a little bit lower. Either way, those kinds of meta details are the kinds of things that aren't typically at the forefront of a product owner or product manager's mind when they ask for things. And that's where this second little sentence or paragraph comes from, is that it's necessary for the delivery of a project because it allows for an in-depth and clear look into the inner workings that are less obvious aspects of the system. So, yeah, a product owner might say, give me a green ball, but they may not understand that by asking for a green ball, that a red ball is going to be painted and that it's going to be heavier. Or perhaps green paint for some reason is always lead based and so it's toxic. And maybe it doesn't taste like pizza anymore. Now it tastes like Rosie O'Donnell. Like I don't I don't know. But it's these meta details that we deliver back and say, is this what you want? And we don't care about the outcome. Like we don't give it to them saying this is what you want, right? We're not trying to persuade or sway things. Again, we're non-biased third-party assessors. We measure it, we deliver it, we move on to the next task. If it does get deployed or it doesn't get deployed, it's not our call in the slightest. So waiting around with bated breath, getting your emotions involved, only hinders the process, only makes things harder. So don't do it, is basically it. However, this definition seems to indicate that that is entirely your job, and it's not. It's really not. It has nothing to do with you. The determination for if something is ready or not is never your call. So trying to give your hopes up into thinking that it is only going to piss you off, and it's only going to make your job harder. If you treat it as though you are giving it an assessment, an honest to goodness assessment of functionality and behavior, you will be happier at work. You'll have less problems with coworkers, and you won't have to become as emotionally depraved as you will end up being if you go with the other definition. So, and that's why I believe that my definition is better. We basically don't ever have the permission to say this is good enough. I've had testers in the past. They'll find what they term to be a bug. A tester will determine to be a bug, and they'll take it to the product owner and say, there's this bug and we need to fix it. And the product owner will take a look at the bug and compare it with the value of the product as a whole. Okay. And say, okay, how much of a risk and how much of a cost is it to fix the problem versus how much of a market share are we going to lose if we deploy it with the problem? And if they're going to spend more than they're going to make from it, they're not going to do it. Business 101. They're not going to do it. But a QA will be like super insistent because they're also passionate and say, no, this is a bug. You got to fix this. And if a product owner who has the last say says this is good enough, then telling a QA whether or not, or having a QA determine whether or not something is good enough is a bit of a misnomer. You don't get the say in the matter. It's not your call. And if you get super emotional and involved with it, then you end up getting mad at the product owner because they're not caring about their product as much. When technically speaking, they're not necessarily supposed to care about the product as much as they're supposed to care about the bottom line that the product produces back for the company. So yeah, I think the first definition really only causes problems, only creates chaos, and doesn't allow for a steady, smooth operation to take place. Okay, this was the last person to disagree with me. You see what happened to him? He lost all of his credibility and his ability to. I'm not gonna lie, I got nothing. If you disagree with me, that's fine. I don't. The cool thing is that if you look at things from this perspective, you know that someone else's approval of your work is never required. I cannot tell you how many times someone has said, Kenny, I disagree with you on this. And the most appropriate response I can think of is, okay, I don't need you to. Like, I don't need anyone to agree with this in the slightest. I know it's accurate. I've seen it work and be accurate. You can disagree with me all that you like on any matter, or on this one specifically, and it doesn't change anything. It's still true. So if you want to be like Zac Efron, just disagree with me. That's the moral of the story, right? Okay, the core of software testing. And I didn't make this. I gotta do. Hold on. Thanks for ringing loudly in my ears there. Let me copy this. Okay, I want to show you here. So we're going to go into the core of software testing, which is test cases. Again, test cases are step-by-step protocols to help you confirm functionality or behavior. Like red ball tastes like pizza. You know, you pick up the red ball, you bite into it, bite into some pizza, compare the taste. Does red ball taste like pizza? Yes or no? So here's a demo test case. And they're not always in this format. There are dozens or hundreds of formats that they can be in. But here's an example of a pretty decent one. So here up here you have a project name. So based off of the terminology we went over, you should kind of know what that is. Module name, don't worry about that. That's going to be like the test name, test case name. Who created it, the date that they created it, and that's important. If it was made by someone who hasn't worked at the company for 4 years and it was created 6 years ago, you may want to look at this test case to see if it's accurate, if it's been maintained well. Because if it doesn't pass anymore because things have changed, this test case is just going to be useless. Anyway, and it shows who executed it and the date. And you basically have the indications here, what the intentions are of the test, description of those intentions, what the steps are in order to complete the test, any kind of conditions or data that you might need to complete that step of the test, the expected results, the actual results, and whether or not it passed or failed. So going through this one by one, every now and then they'll be numbered, 1, 2, 3. This would be like 8 steps in a test case. You don't have to number them. Some people like it, other people don't. It makes it a little bit easier to discuss. If they're numbered, so you can say it failed on step 6 instead of saying it failed on navigate to login page or enter a valid username. Okay. But essentially, these are the steps you want to take a look at, the test steps. You want to navigate to the login page. Hopefully they've given to you what the login page is so that you don't have to guess what that page is. Enter a valid username, and they give you a username. Say, use this username when you're logging in. Enter a valid password. What's the valid password? Here it is. They provide it to you. Click the login button. Here's the expected result, that the user gets logged in and that they get logged in successfully. Navigate to the login page. Here's another one. It actually looks like it's 2 test cases here. So this one is to test that you can log in, and this one is to test the login functionality in banking. They're both the same. That's dumb. Whoever wrote this column should be stabbed with love. But basically, this one is the expectation is that they get logged in, and they're showing that they don't get logged in. You can see they changed the password here, and as a result, it failed. So you can have tests that say, confirm you can't log in, and not logging in passes the test, because that's the test, is that you can't log in. And so this is just an example of a couple of test cases, I guess. But they're supposed to be kind of step-by-step scenarios. So we're going to come back over to here, and I'm going to present again. Hopefully it doesn't go all the way back to the beginning. Okay. Open a door test. So this is the training that I've given to my team in the past. When we're sitting in like a meeting room, or you can do it in the room that you're currently in, you basically have to write a test case for opening the door. Okay. And you probably did an exercise like this in elementary school when your teacher's like, give me instructions on how to make a sandwich. And everyone gets it wrong except for that one clever douchebag who's heard the riddle before and they know exactly what to do. But basically, the open a door test, you're supposed to make up this test case that says, here's how you open a door. but specifically how to open this door. So your door in whatever room you're in. Um, and the steps are going to be different from room to room. So they could all be called, the test cases could all be called open a door, but they're in different rooms or in different systems or in different pieces of software. And if you don't follow the proper steps for the proper room, you're not going to be able to open the door. And so, things are like like stand up as step one. Step two, uh, look at the space between you and the door and determine if there are any obstacles that you have to take into consideration. Step three, if there are obstacles, plot a path where you don't run into any of those obstacles, but get to the door in the shortest period of time. Step four, take that route and confirm you get to the door without running into any obstacles. Step five, let's say it's a door that swings inward to you and the doorknob is on the left. You could say, reach out with your right hand and grasp the doorknob with your right hand. Turn the doorknob clockwise, 90 degrees, and pull toward you. Next step, confirm the door swings out toward you, and that result is an open door. And then the last step being, or not last step, but like next step being let go of the doorknob. And then the last step being walk through the door to confirm that it's open. So if you were to, just go to wherever you're at right now and open the nearest door, it wouldn't take you 3 minutes to do that. But to read through all the steps and re-execute it, it's going to take you 3 minutes. It's going to take you more than the actual doing of the test is, because that's what a test case needs to be. It needs to be like painstakingly detailed so that we don't miss anything in the empty space between steps. Okay. Like how I almost said that the last step was to walk through the door, but I didn't tell you to let go of the doorknob. Can you imagine what the result would be if you held onto the doorknob and tried walking through the door threshold? You could slam the door on your arm, you could fracture your arm, you could break your wrist, all sorts of things could happen. And so you're basically trying to program it as though if you took anyone off the street, okay? Like you need to write your test cases so that if you took someone off the street and put them in front of your test case, not knowing anything about the system that they're about to test, they could follow it step by step and tell you whether or not the test case succeeds. That's kind of the level of description that a test case needs to have. But test cases are basically the core of software testing. Without test cases, you're basically blindly wandering around hoping that you stumble across a problem. Or a change of behavior, as I like to call them, not really bugs. But I'll cover that again later. Anyway, test cases. Look them up, learn different styles, practice on various things, making a sandwich, opening a door, crying yourself to sleep at night, whatever you want to do. I'd say your first assignment from watching these is to make 2 test cases for different things based off of things that are easily accessible to you, and try to make it in a way that if you gave it to someone else, anyone else, they could sit in the same position that you're at while you're writing the test and perform the function for you and confirm that the test case is passing. So I'm going to say that's your first piece of homework. Okay. So we're going to go into some job postings here. And reason why is because, is because job postings are a great place to go to see what kinds of skills you need to have. And we're actually going to list them here. necessary skills to acquire to become a software tester. So I asked for software testing postings from Google and got different ones. I got QA tester, two QA tester, one software QA tester automation job. Again, lots of different titles. If you take a look at their responsibilities, a lot of them have kind of the core similar responsibilities. So we're just going to read through these and kind of list out commonalities. Okay. So this one's in Phoenix. Don't really care about the um, location. You can see that they're offering $55,000 a year, and for an entry level position, that's okay. That's pretty standard, pretty average. It might be a little bit higher in other places, but that's an okay amount to get into. If once you're going into things like automation, it gets much closer to being six figures, probably 80, 90 area. So here we have basic qualifications. Excellent experience with Unix and scripting. If you don't know what Unix is, that's okay. You can look it up. Google what Unix is. You can Google what Shell, Perl, PHP, and Python are. I can tell you that they're all different languages. Scripting is the thing you want to know. So we're gonna write scripting down. Okay. Efficient in shell scripting and Ansible. They just repeated the same thing. Like as a QA professional, someone who worries about efficiency, repeating the same thing twice pisses me off. Like I can tell you that whoever wrote this job description is not a QA tester. Whoever is explaining what they're expecting or looking for is not a QA tester. Experience working with hardware and bare metal. Okay, so you have to kind of know what hardware is and what it does. Hardware behavior. Specifications. Okay. That's not typical. Like if you don't know exactly how RAM timing works with your processor, not going to be a huge thing as a QA or as a software tester. But again, if you were to look up like different kinds of jobs you can get as a software tester or as a QA, there are dozens, and some of those might actually require some hardware knowledge. Networking, storage, yep. So networking, and these are pretty vague in general terms. Networking doesn't tell you a whole heck of a lot. Configuration management, automation, no idea what that is. It's probably some sort of term that they have in-house that means something to them, but means nothing to the rest of the world. Like, oh my gosh, TPC reports. What is it called from Office Space? TPS reports, is that it? Yeah, TPS reports. It's like TPS reports to that company. Nobody else knows what they are or what the function of them, but to them it means something, right? That's likely what this means. I no clue what that means to them. Experience in Kickstart, lights out management, TFTP, DHCP, and PXE booting. DHCP is part of networking. It's dynamic host content protocol. TFTP, I know FTP stands for file transfer protocol. I'm not entirely certain what the T stands for. That could be chalked up into networking as well. Lights out management, I don't know what that is, but it seems like it's more of a manage yourself instead of having someone micromanage you. Kickstart sounds like it would be some sort of a product or technology. Let's take a look at Kickstart. It's probably like bring up Kickstarter, but that's not. Mountain Dew and Kickstarter. It's a platform that bridges the gap between startups, corporations. Gosh, maybe this is for Kickstarter. Oh my gosh. Did I find a QA job for a Kickstarting group? K-Force Technology? Yeah. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Okay, here it is. Okay. Duties. Here are your duties. Here's what they expect you to do with this vast knowledge of repetitiveness. Requirement analysis and technical documentation. They basically expect you to be able to analyze and give feedback on things and write it down. That's basically it. If you've ever said, like, watch where you're driving to someone on the road, you're capable of analysis because you've basically taken someone else's behavior, formulated an opinion around it based off of evidences, and the only difference is that you haven't written it down yet. If you text someone later about some stupid driver that cut you off, you qualify for this step, which practically everyone has. Hands-on design, technology selection, architect. These things are not a tester's primary responsibility. I don't know entirely. I'm not entirely sure what they're expecting you to architect, unless it's for some sort of automation framework. And in that case, they should be looking for an automator, not a QA tester. Technology selection, that's more of a business decision because any technology you use is going to have a cost, and that cost compounds when you add it to a product and make it a reliability, or not a reliability, a liability for that product. So that's not really a QA function either. Hands-on design, you're not a designer. You're not supposed to be doing that. And there are some companies who will take QA and repurpose them to other jobs because the general comparison of jobs, QA salaries are lower than a lot of other groups. So they'll hire a QA for a lower salary and retask them to something that they would have to pay someone 20 to 100% more for. Don't ever let someone do that. If someone wants to repurpose you for something, be happy to negotiate your contract or your position with them, but don't just lay back and take it because you're afraid that if you lose the job, you won't be able to find another one. The industry is packed full of jobs right now, and that kind of crap doesn't really fly. So this is like a non-starter in my mind. So hands-on implementation of all critical components of system for data governance. That they need someone to look over their posting here. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Build automated tool for component integrated and regression testing. Yeah, that's not a QA tester. This isn't a 55K a year person. They're asking for like a 90K a year person plus. That is ridiculous. Lead and instruct offshore developer to work with the same project. We're still going to put automation in here, but not to that level that they're asking for or expecting. Am I in the wrong? I am in the wrong one. Set the bar high for what a company should do, not a QA's job. The 4 pillars of the company are to do these things. I like that they have 4 pillars and they have like 12 bullet points. Reviewing this tells me that the strategic staffing solutions, they're probably a third-party contractor that don't really care about the job that they get you. They get paid once they get you a job. So whatever kind of bullcrap hole they can throw you into to get you a job, they will do. They'll get great salespeople that make you feel like they care about you as a person or as an employee, but their business is to get you a job, not to make sure you're happy with your job. Because really, in honesty, if you don't like the job and go to a different one, they get paid again for the new job. So for now, I'd avoid contracting groups, which is ironic because this is the next one, K-Force Technology. They're also a contracting. I don't know. I'm having a hard time with words right now. Maybe it's because I've been talking for an hour. So they give you like a summary here. This is okay. Whoever wrote this is doing much better. So then the major duties of this position are to improve efficiency of the testing process across projects by implementing test automation and other necessary non-functional load stress security testing solutions. That's great. These people are talking about different layers and kinds of testing. Load testing, stress testing, the same thing. Security testing is different. The ideal candidate would have a keen interest in technology, hardware and or software, um, and would love to uphold the quality of deliverables and developing cutting edge applications. Okay, they're basically saying they want a go getter. They want someone who's not going to sit around and wait for an assignment. They want someone who's going to go out and find an assignment and work on it. Key responsibilities are developing, implementing, maintaining test automation process across projects. Great. They are looking for an automator, so they're probably looking to pay close to six figures for this person. Create test cases, which we know about. Scenarios and scripts, which exercise the requirements under test. Wonderful. So some of the test cases that you can run are very code-based, very heavy in command line and scripting, so you don't really have a browser that you can go to and interact with. For those kinds of things, you want to script those and you want to automate those, because it speeds them up. A computer can do it so much faster there than you can. And if it takes you 1 hour to automate a 2-minute test, it'll take 30 tests before you start generating uh, increase efficiency from that. It's a devaluation or devaluation mechanic. So if it takes you 2 minutes to do, it takes you an hour to automate. After 30 attempts or 30 runnings of that script, the time that it took you to make it is now the same as the amount of time that you would have put into testing it. And anything that goes on after that is just pure efficiency, pure gravy. Work with developers, business analysts, product owners, and project managers to identify and help resolve problems and issues. Great. So you need to have some sort of collaboration skills. You need to be able to talk to people, to receive feedback and give feedback. Establish and maintain an effective working team relationships and rapport with all departments. Same thing. Assist in the development of systematic approaches for assuring high quality services. Integrate and align processes. It'll be best achieved. Okay, yeah. Report and track issues. Okay. Bug management. For some reason, this is a QA thing. It has to lie somewhere, and it's probably best in QA because we have most of our view in the meta details, and that's typically where bugs come up, is during meta-analysis of information. I'll have the ability to work from home a few days. Well, that's not a responsibility. That's a plus, like a bonus, a perk. Or they're saying that you have to make sure that you live in a place that will afford you the ability to work from home a few days a week. Requirements. When they say bachelor's degree in computer science or equivalent experience, what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop the mentally handicapped janitor of the school down the street from applying for this because they think they can do it. They put that on there to discourage people who haven't received a formal education. Hopefully the education that I'm going to be providing to you with these videos is better than what you'd get at school, and much cheaper. So consider this your bachelor's of computer science. This kind of stuff that you'd learn in computer science is great for very general kind of qualification for lots of things in the industry. I'm going to focus on one. And I'm going to get rid of all the extra noise that otherwise would not help you and probably just confuse you. Experience in manual software testing. This is easy. Manual software test. If you've ever used a website, you've done manual software testing. You may not know that you've done it, but you've done it because that's what it is. You're going and trying things and hoping that it works, because if it doesn't work, you got to do something else, and that's just, you don't want that. It's not why you jumped online, is to not have something work. 2 to 4 years of experience in web application automation testing using Test Complete or similar. So they're basically saying this is the technology that we use. We fully recognize that there are lots of other frameworks out there that exist. If you've used any of them, we accept that, but just be aware of how automation testing works. and we already have that on our list, and we're going to cover that in other lessons. Mobile software application testing, very similar to software testing. It's done on a different medium. One's done on a desktop, the other's done on your phone. And we'll talk more about why later. So, mobile knowledge. Okay. Writing experience in C#. Okay, programming languages. We will cover this later, but not in super. I'm hoping this is not going to be a big programming tutorial. We might do a programming tutorial later for various languages, but I want to get the concept and the idea of software testing locked in before we try to involve anything really complicated. Okay, so databases, okay. Life cycles, methodologies, okay, those are pretty standard. Databases, methodologies of development. Bug reporting, analyzing, debugging, things of that nature. We've already discussed that. And then they say, okay, send us an email. So you can see down here, at least on Google, they show you what other people are asking for pay for similar jobs. I don't always use these because these are what is being asked for, not necessarily what is being paid. Yeah, just know that you should never accept below 46, but there's no reason why you shouldn't ever ask for 90. Zero reason. Okay, and this one, we'll go through this quick. This video is already much longer than I thought it was going to be, and I apologize. I'm not trying to fire hose you too much. Hopefully all the stuff I'm talking about is simple enough and easy enough to understand that you won't be completely lost and ask me to do another video explaining this one, kind of a thing, Okay, responsibilities. Things are deployed, and they have few defects. Assist with design and execute manual tests. Okay, we've covered that. Prepare specification and documentation. Yep, got to write crap down. Work with product developers to isolate issues. Okay, that's debugging. Understanding, following, and participating in all facets of the Scrum process. It's part of the development methodology. Document within the defined corporate tool testing result. Okay, what they're saying here is that they have a set of tools that they use. They like the tools. They want to keep using those tools. You might have experience with other tools that you like, that you're more qualified in. That's cool. We don't want to use those. We want to use our tools. It's very often that someone will come into a new workspace and try to redefine things so it fits their mold of how things should be done. Don't be that person. Be willing to learn new technologies and new ways of doing things and implement your style into those technologies. Don't be the person who refuses to because they're different than what you know. Doing it so that they have to change to you means that you're likely not, that either you're not confident in your ability to learn, or you're too lazy to try. Neither of which are good kinds of things to project to people. Evaluate problems identified in production. Yep, finding bugs and debugging. Execute special projects, including but limited to functional. Yeah. Every now and then you'll have a piece of work that comes down which just for some reason bogs down the system, makes things run slow. They want you to have the ability to say, that's running slow. You kind of have to have some sort of a gumption or a boldness to you to do the job. You have to kind of be willing to say, that's wrong. And you got to be willing to say that to the smartest person in the department, in the company. Even the person who has the power to fire you, you kind of have to have the boldness and the gumption to say, no, that's not going to work. That's not scalable. We can't do that. It's basically what they're saying is they need someone who's a little bit bold. Qualifications, bachelor's degree. You're going to see that everywhere. Don't worry about it. 3 to 5 years of software testing quality assurance. Now they're looking for someone who has some experience and can implement new ones, and that's why they're saying 3 to 5 years. They don't want someone who this is going to be their first time using a set of tools and doesn't understand how things work. They don't want someone who's going to take 6 to 9 months to get up to speed. They want someone who's going to be up to speed in a month or two. It's likely that they'll pay pretty good for that as well. Competent in testing theory knowledge, good. That means they just want you to be able to have discussions on it. If you're doing something that someone else says you should probably be testing it a different way, you can have a non-emotional, intellectual discussion on it without it becoming a hindrance to the work. Trying to figure out why. Oh, I was looking at the pay down here, 130,000 to 800,000 a year, but this is some other currency. I have no idea what currency that is. Maybe is that? It almost looks like a Japanese symbol, but pretty sure it's like $5,000 a year. No, yen is a Y with, it doesn't matter. Proficient in understanding written requirements, test cases, we've covered those. Experience with issue defect tracking, bugs, ability to execute simple SQL queries, that's database stuff. And as we get into this, you'll be able to identify these linkages that I already have, like how I'm seeing SQL queries. Well, how do I know that's a database? Because SQL is a database. It's a very popular database. I'm sure somebody could come up with a mobile app called SQL, and that's their product name, and they have to talk about SQL as though it's not a database. And that's fine, but for the vast majority of the world, if you say SQL or SQL, they're going to be thinking databases. And it's just exposure to the industry, which leads to those kinds of linkages. So I don't expect you to be able to go through like job postings here and say, oh, I know what this is. We're going to cover that later. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to show that from job posting to job posting, regardless of what the job title is, you have similar skills that are looked for across all of them. The level of expertise that you have and the discipline that you have in learning new ones of the same variety are what determines your pay scale and your title. And that's the reason for this portion of the video. Document corporate tools, special projects, proficient, ability to execute SQL, ability to work effectively in a fast-paced, dynamic environment. They're saying here that sometimes things can get hectic, and they understand that things can get hectic, and people can sometimes just lose their shit. And they want someone who, at first glance, takes a look at that environment and says, I can do that. I can try to do that. I'm confident in my ability to try to do that. But people who look at that and say, ooh, I don't know if I want to stay later to this, they're going to be discouraged by that line, and that's the intention of that line of the posting. They're trying to discourage people who may not be willing to put in the extra effort when the company needs it. Self-motivated, kind of referring to the same as the previous line. Excellent communication. You'll see that everywhere. No one's going to put on a posting, we want someone who only talks in Adam Sandler's gibberish language. You're never going to see that in a posting unless Adam Sandler himself posts it. It's a joke to F with people. Highly committed to the team's success. Of course. Again, they're not going to ask for someone who can't do that. Okay, so those are 3 job postings, and they all used a different language to say them, but these are the basic skills that you need to do anything in software testing. Now, some of these aren't really required. Like I have a guy who's working for me who's been there for a year and a half, almost 2 years now. He's not the best programmer. Not the best programmer at all. But he's a good software tester, like a real solid software tester. And despite him not knowing programming, if it ever came down from the top that I needed to fire one of my guys, even though he doesn't know programming, I would actually fire a programmer over him because of how good of a software tester he is. Some of these aren't even necessarily needed, but they're good skills to have. I would say that scripting, automation, collaboration skills, and bug management are the top four that you would need to worry about. In automation, they have so many different solutions out there that require no programming. Like they have one that records your mouse clicks on what you type into your keyboard, and when you're done, when you start, you say start, you do the test, you click stop, and next time you want to do that same test, you click run, and it does all the same things for you. It requires zero programming. It requires you to be able to push play, pause, and stop. So if you know how to use a VCR, if you know what a VCR is, you're qualified to do automation, at least at some level. Okay, I'm gonna go back in here. I don't think I have anything else I need to click on. Okay, man, I'm sorry for the length of this video. Break it up however you need to. I'm so sorry. I meant for this to be like 30 minutes. It's gonna be an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I apologize. I hope YouTube can handle this. If not, I'll break it up into chunks. Okay, perspective of a tester. Now, these are things that basically help define what is a good software tester. I often ask the Coke machine puzzle or problem when I go to interviews, when I go to interview a new software tester. And basically what this is I want to gauge the way that their minds address or approach a task. Okay. The Coke machine puzzle or problem is you and I are walking down the street, and I want you to envision this. You and I are walking down the street, and there's a Coke machine. As we're walking by the Coke machine, I say, hey, I want you to test that Coke machine for me. And that's all I tell you. And using just the knowledge that you have about Coke machines, you're supposed to devise a set of test cases for me. And I don't want the steps, the super specific. I want just the titles of the test. I want you to tell me how you would test the Coke machine. And typically the answer is going to be like, put some money in, push a button, make sure you get a Coke. I've tested it. No, you haven't. That's not even close to a correct answer. People would argue, no, that's a correct answer because that's one way you could test it. No, at that point you're not testing anything. If you can give a monkey a bunch of rocks and a day of throwing them at the Coke machine, they could pretty much produce the same kind of output and result of just doing the base functionality. I would not call that good testing in the slightest. I wouldn't even call it right testing. I would call it wrong testing. So the way that I would expect a tester, someone with the perspective and the perception of approaching the task, is yes, there are the positive test cases. Yes, there are the things that you need to make sure work, that you put money in and get a Coke back. And that's basically how I would expect them to phrase it is, yeah, of course I'd make sure it works. Put in some money, push each of the buttons, make sure each of the products come out and they match the label, fine. But I'm looking for the person who says, I stick something down the coin slot to see if I can trigger it to think that money has been taken even though it hasn't. I want the person who sticks their arm up the dispensing spout of the vending machine to see if there's a way they can jimmy out a product. I want someone who will say that they're going to look up the serial number of the vending machine that's viewable from the back and look up like an admin code of buttons they push in and coin return things that they hold down for a certain number of seconds or in a certain order to put it into an admin debugging mode where they can just get soda for free. I want that person, the person who doesn't just say put money in and get a product back. The perspective of a tester is to never approach the task from the obvious perspective. Of course, the obvious is part of it. That's why it's obvious. You need someone who's not obvious. You need someone who will kick the crap out of the vending machine, who will attempt to pick it up and smash it to pieces, who will throw me into the vending machine to see how I respond and how the vending machine responds. I need the people that will not do the obvious, because if what we did was just left up to the obvious, there wouldn't be an entire career based around it, because it would already be taken care of in what the developer does when they make it. And that's just insane. It has nothing to do with the job. So the obvious, out the door. If anyone asks you, how would you test this? I want you to think of the non-obvious answers. Of course, include them in your answer, but the majority of your time should be focusing on the non-obvious scenarios. And that's how you get the perspective of a tester, is you take something that is presented and you approach it from a non-obvious perspective. So, have you ever heard someone say, are you a glass is half full or glass is half empty kind of person? I recently heard the best description for how a programmer would answer that question. A programmer, when asked that question, would say, the glass is always full of something, whether it's full of empty air or water or wine or sadness or tears or the sorrow of a long lost nation. I don't care. It's always full of something. You're given an option or a scenario with two options, and instead of answering with the two options within the boundaries that they're giving you, the obvious solutions, you find another one. That is the tester perspective. That is a programmer's perspective of not forcing your mind into the limitation that someone else presents simply because it's convenient for them. There's always another option. Always. And that's what outside the box answers are. There are lots of brain teasers out there and riddles and such that help test people's ability to think laterally. Here's a dumb one. A squirrel finds a box filled with corn. Okay, corn that has been freshly picked from the stalk, and the squirrel can only carry one at a time, but they take each ear of corn to their den. Okay, hold on. They take each ear of corn to their den, and there are 8 pieces of corn. Since they can only take one ear of corn per trip, how many total ears of corn, or how many total ears will have been transferred after 5 pieces of corn? Something like that. And people will go, oh, well, you got 5 and there's 5, so yeah, it would be 5. But it's not, because the squirrel has 2 ears. Stuff like that, where because they have 2 ears, going and getting the corn and bringing it back, you have 2 that transfer there and 3 that come back. So for every round trip, 5 ears are being transferred. And so the answer is 25. And it's those kinds of trick questions. It's the teaching of thinking of things laterally, that even though we're talking about ears of corn, that wasn't specified in the request. And that's often how things are. We get acceptance criteria that says make sure the window opens. But what if the window does open, but it doesn't open straight, or it's skewed, or maybe when it opens it shatters, but it's still open? You kind of have to think outside the box when you're testing something, because it's never as straightforward as you think it is. Again, if it's obvious, it's not stretching the boundary of functionality that an actual user is going to use it. I've had users find stupid crap that you look at, and even as a tester, you go, how in the hell did they get into this state? Like, it's blowing my mind that they stumbled across this, but they did, and we got to take care of it. If you can get to a point where that never happens, you're like the best tester in the world. I'm not to that point yet. I hope you get there, though. But that's what an outside the box answer is. Again, you don't want the obvious. Lastly is the aspect of trust. So you want to trust your product owner and product manager that they're making good business decisions. You want to trust that the developers are working hard to deliver what the product owners and managers want. You should never trust either of them to do your job for you. You should never trust a developer when they say, oh, I just made this small textual change. Nothing functionally changed. It can just be deployed now without testing it. Never. They can even show you the pull request. They can even show you the what they changed in the code, and line up all the lines of code side by side and say, look, this is the one difference between the two. It's okay the way it is. You cannot trust that. You cannot rely on that. There are too many moving pieces that they don't have control over that could go wrong between them making the one character change and it going into production. Trust nothing. It might seem super convenient. It's not the correct answer though. You will get burned, and you likely will find a scenario where there's a colleague or someone that you really do trust, or you really think I can let this person deploy this, and they'll deploy it and things will break, and it'll come back and say, okay, well, who approved this to go out? And they're going to look at you and go, why did you approve this? And you're going to have to be like, it seemed okay at the time. And it's just bad practice. You're not saying that you don't trust them as a person. You're saying that you don't trust the process to be as flawless and foolproof as we would hope. Okay. The conclusion then is that you are in really good hands with me, like really, really good hands with me. I've gone to several testing conferences, and I've bounced these ideas off of other software testing professionals, and a lot of them treated me like the plague, because these kinds of things are not mainstream in the industry. However, when I've spoken with the kind of the leaders of the industry about this, they have not only supported it, they've encouraged me to publish my findings and the way I'm doing things, because this is the way that things are going to be done in the future. That these leaders are trying to push things right now, but there's so much history and tradition set in software testing, it's hard to convince people to stop being emotional about things. I know what I'm talking about. I am very good at my job, and I am very good at other jobs, and I really like this one the most. I have offered my help to hundreds of people, and I have been taken up by a couple dozen people to help. And of those couple of dozen, only 3 have really pushed to the end. One of them currently works for me. Another one, she lives in Estonia. I met her playing a text-based game like Zork. Not Zork, but like Zork, like 8 years ago. Met them playing, and they said, I really like what you talk about for work. How do I go about doing that? And I taught her how to. And even after all this time, she actually messaged me for the first time in like 9 months the other day and said, hey, I'm working on this project. Can you help me out with it? So I went through it and tried to help her out with it as much as I could. But she has a good job, and she's supporting a fairly large family in a that was in a rather dismal state for finances and opportunity. And I don't take credit for any of that, because of the hundreds and because of the dozens. They are where they're at because they kept going, because they persisted. I only condensed the information which is readily available on the internet and made it more easily consumable for them. That's it. But every bite they had to take, every step that they had to go, is their fault, is their doing, and is their accomplishment and success. I am bragging about me. I am incredible at my job. I am very good at my job. I can help you become very good at the same job. You have to trust yourself more than you trust me, because it's you that's going to stand in your own way the most. Even if I stop doing these videos and stop helping, the information is still available and is still out there. And if you don't have the boldness or gumption to go out and get it yourself, you're probably not going to be the best software tester in the world. You could be a software tester, but not the best in the world. And I want you all to dethrone me one day, to come to where I work and to do a better job than I am and get me fired for being a better software tester than me. I want you to do that. That would make me happy. I would go brag about that to people. I trained someone so well, they beat the shit out of me and kicked me out of my own office. Fine. I'm happy with that. But it's up to you. And I'll fight you the entire way, and I'll make you earn it. But I'll be proud the day that it happens. So I'm very happy to do this. I'm very happy to provide this information and to help you along. I'm happy to teach and even to break off these videos into more of a one-on-one scenario to help out with individualized learning. You just have to message me and ask. And I'll try and make time and find time to do that. Until then, remember, the only homework I got for you is to write a couple of test cases and as much minute descriptive detail as you can, that if I were to give it to someone who's, let's say, just learning English, that they would be able to follow the steps and perform the tasks. So try to use simple words, small words, easy to use words, beginner words to do all these tasks. And you choose the tasks. That requires you to take up the responsibility and find something. It doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, if it's complicated, it's going to be a really long test case and we're both going to get bored. Do something simple: turning on a light, opening a door, feeding the dog, screaming at a random person who walks by, avoiding a zombie. I don't care. You choose. Tell me. Thank you for watching so much. Again, if you feel so inclined, make sure that you stretch hard on your mouse over top of that like button and go ahead and smoosh booties with the subscribe button, and hopefully I'll get more content to you. Until next time, this is your friendly neighborhood Kamikalo Z signing off, and Kenny just saying, have a good day.